2 minutes until showtime.
All right, hi everybody who's there. We will be go live in 2 minutes. 2 minutes to showtime. Finally back home. Yes, I'm finally back home. I'll take this live. So we're on live. Okay, we're on live there.
Minute until showtime.
All right, we're 20 seconds away. 20 seconds away from launch of show.
Show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Blog Talk Radio.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Yaron Brook Show. I am back, as you can tell, probably from the video, those of you watching by video. I am back at in Puerto Rico. So back home after 3 weeks of traveling. Have to admit, I scheduled the show this afternoon when I was feeling well, and right now I can barely keep my eyes open. I am suffering from a massive case of jet lag. And there goes my phone. No, go away. All right, we'll turn that off. Jet lag. So hopefully I'll be able to survive. Hopefully I'll be coherent. Hopefully what I say makes any sense. As you know, I was on the road for 3 weeks, 21 days exactly. Got home late last night. Home to Puerto Rico, traveled to 7 countries, spoke in 6 of them, and 17 talks, I think it was. 17. I think it was 9, 9 in Argentina and Brazil, and another 8 in Serbia, Hungary, Ukraine, and Tbilisi, and Georgia. All right, let's see. If you want to ask questions, the best way to do it is on YouTube with the what's called Super Chat. So there's a $sign at the bottom of the YouTube chat thing. You press on that, you make a contribution to Yaron Brook Show, and it highlights your question, and then I can't ignore it, and I have to answer it. And it's a cool trade because you get to contribute to the show, and I get to answer your question. So it's an easy way to go. So if you want to ask a question, it's called Super Chat, and it's a way to support the show and to guarantee me answering your question. Let's see. What am I? All right. So somebody's telling me about Russia. But in London. Okay, cool. London. I'll be back in London. All right, just a quick overview of my trip. So as I said, I think I've talked about Argentina, Brazil, a lot of excitement, particularly Brazil. I really like Brazil. People incredibly friendly, very warm, and and very motivated and excited to do things. So I find Brazil particularly positive in terms of prospects for the future, and the people there just truly amazing. I think, I spoke in front of one day. One of the events I did was in front of 4,000 people. I also did another event in front of 300 people, and then 3 other smaller events. Argentina was terrific. We did a debate, about 300 people at the debate, and another 3 events 2 events in Buenos Aires and 1 event in Cordoba. Incredible people in Argentina, friendly, supportive, and interested in doing a lot more. So I expect a lot of great things coming out of Argentina. Belgrade was the European Students for Liberty. The video from that event, which is a short talk, I think a pretty motivational talk that I gave about free speech, I think is up or is going up on YouTube any day, minute now, hour now. So please, you can go and access that video. It's up online, so you have access to that. Then, and that was terrific. I don't know, about 400 or 500 kids there, very energetic, very motivated from all over Europe. A bunch of Israeli kids there. I'm going to do some events for them when I'm in Israel. A bunch of Spanish kids. I'm going to do an event in Barcelona in June. And just from all over Europe, a lot of Eastern Europeans. And it was just a fantastic event. Again, you can see that video. I think it just went up. Then from there, I went to Hungary, did an event there at the university. First event, I think, by an objectivist, at least from the Ayn Rand Institute, ever in Hungary, in Budapest. Sad political situation in Hungary. The kind of alt-right is winning elections in Hungary. The anti-Semitic, anti-immigration, anti-press, anti-free speech right in Hungary is winning there. So spoke there. It was really interesting to talk to people and get insight into what is going on. They're really negative. The people, the kind of free market people there, the people who love Ayn Rand are very, very negative about the future of Hungary and about the political chaos, the political situation in Hungary, not chaos, just the situation. Then from Hungary, went to Kiev. Kiev was smaller events than I expected, but the people there are incredibly motivated. I did 3 events in Kiev in 2 days. Then from Kiev, I went to Tbilisi, and Tbilisi is fantastic. We did 3 events in Tbilisi, one of them at Free University, which is a university dedicated, was founded by a free market guy. His daughter runs it today, very influenced by Ayn Rand. And it's kind of dedicated to classical liberal ideas. And, I'd say Georgia generally, a very free marketplace and very inspiring, very inspiring. So, I really like Georgia. I really like Tbilisi, and the people there are fantastic. So probably be back in Tbilisi sometime, or in Georgia at least sometime soon, to do some more events over the next year or so. All right, then flew home. That was my 3 weeks. Hope you guys had a productive, busy few weeks while I was gone. We haven't done too many shows, so let's get right into it. A lot happening in the news. There's always a lot happening in the news. So let's see, where should we start? Well, let's start with this attack in Toronto. What looks like a terrorist attack. They're not saying, of course they won't say if they can avoid saying it. They're trying to delay saying anything, but it looks like somebody took a truck and like we've seen in many places in Europe, and it happened in New York City, and it's happened, it seems to be happening all over the world, happened in Israel, where a vehicle is being used as a terror weapon that is being used to run people over. Well, today, I think in Toronto, 9 people are being killed, 16 injured. It looks like a white Renault truck just drove over people. It's in an area of Toronto which is filled with immigrants, which is a little strange in terms of choosing that area. But I guess once you want to kill people, you don't really care who you're killing. My guess is this will be a Muslim inspired by all the other terrorist attacks that have happened using automobiles. But we still don't know. We still don't have a name. The Toronto authorities are not releasing any information. But again, it is what you would expect. It is what you would expect from an attack like this. There's been a series of them. Over the last 2 years, 86 people were killed on Bastille Day in Nice, France. I'm actually going to be in Nice in a few weeks. But that was the most devastating of all these car attacks. It was a big truck. He took a big truck and he ran through on Bastille Day where everybody was out, just having a good time. Families were out there, kids, and just ran over people inspired by ISIS. 12 people were killed in Berlin. Christmas in a busy Christmas market. You had Barcelona where 13 were killed and 100 people were injured. When again a van did it, Moldova. You had New York. You had when a Uzbek man, a Muslim, killed 12 and killed 8 and injured 12. So this is a pattern, and this is easy for them, right? You don't need a plan. You don't need weapons. You rent a car. You find a busy street. You go on the pavement. You kill as many people as possible. It is very effective in terms of terrorizing because it's random. It's not the Twin Towers. It's not the Pentagon. It's not some big monumental place. It could happen anywhere, any place, at any time, which is, I think, the most effective way to terrorize people, is to just have random attacks in random places. After 9/11, I said I commented that if they really wanted to terrorize Americans, they would start sending suicide bombers into malls randomly and blowing them up in rural America, in suburban America, in all over America, not just in New York City. That is what will ultimately really terrorize people. And I think this using cars is a very effective way to create terror, particularly, and it's a very cheap way. And it requires no planning, no resources, doesn't require bomb making. Bomb makers are rare. They usually blow themselves up. They're easy to catch. They have to get materials. It's relatively difficult, particularly in a world of surveillance like we live in today. But to take a car, to get into a car, go drive down a street, easy, no problem. And again, as long as there is a sense by these people that they can achieve the terror that they seek, that they can ultimately bring America or the West to its knees, that we will compromise and we will appease and we will, as long as that is the case, as long as that is what they believe, they will continue to do this. On the other hand, to put it all in perspective, very few people die today of terror attacks. Fewer people in the United States and in Europe die from terror attacks today than did in the 1970s. If you take out 9/11, but you include all the other Islamic terrorist attacks since 2000, the last 18 years are less in terms of death per year. Death per 100,000 people of the population are less deadly than the 1970s were, which is kind of interesting. You wouldn't expect that, but the fact is that in those days Europe was terrorized. Not only by the PLO, by various Palestinian groups, but it was also being terrorized by Marxist groups. It was terrorized by the Red Brigade. I forget all the names. Baden-Meinhof in Germany. All over Europe, and indeed in those days, it was much more dangerous. It was much more likely that you die from a terrorist attack than it is today. So, in spite of the horror of this, in spite of the frequency, in spite of the devastation, it is still, we still live in the safest period in all of human history. And that is an important context to hold. Even with regard to terrorism, there have been periods in history that have been far, far more dangerous than it is right now. Of course, the solution to this is actually to recognize the threat and to make it clear to them they won't win. And there are a variety of ways you can make it clear to them they won't win. You can destroy their allies. You can stand up for Western values. You can declare the fact that we will fight for reason and self-interest and individualism and capitalism, that we will fight for those values, that we will never, ever give in. You can declare the enemy. You can, as soon as you know that this is a Muslim and it's an Islamic terrorism, you can declare it as such, declare it as evil as it is, instead of hiding it and pretending that it's not Islamic terrorism, that it's something else. So there are lots of ways in which we could just, by standing up, by unequivocally presenting the case for our civilization and unequivocally declaring that we will not be defeated and we will not let them defeat us, you would just make these things less likely. Because again, nobody, I've said this many, many times, nobody wants to die, even for 72 virgins, for a losing cause. And what they need to be convinced of is that trying to defeat the West is a losing cause, which it is, even as weak as we are. But if we actually declared it as such, actually made a big deal of it being such, I think a lot of this would disappear. Yeah, I mean, even somebody saying, it's a totally pointless killing. It is, and it doesn't achieve anything. And indeed, I think it's the other way around. It's a case where the more they do this kind of crap, the more the West will wake up and want to crush them and want to devastate them. I've said this many times, but one day, if terrorism, increases in Europe, one day the Germans will wake up and just wipe them out. And that will happen. That will happen as long as they use violence. It's much more likely for Islam to be successful in taking over the West, again, in Europe, if they do so in a peaceful way. If they just do so by having lots of kids and sustaining themselves ideologically, and the West is so weak that they might just allow them to take it over. So I think that's a much more likely circumstance. The more violent the Muslims become, the more likely it is that they will just be wiped out at some point. So in the more likely it is that they awaken, nationalism and fascism, and within the West, as we're seeing in Hungary. I mean, the Hungarian semi-dictator today uses the issue of Islam, even though Islam's not a problem in Hungary, uses the issue of Islam in the West as a means to gaining power and a means to taking over control over the media and over government and over the courts, and really establish himself as an authoritarian. I imagine that happening all over Europe. Ultimately, they would completely crush and destroy Islam, and of course we'd get fascism as a consequence. So it's not a good outcome. It's not an outcome I'm looking forward to, but it is the outcome the Muslims are asking for if they continue with their violent ways. They are much more likely to be successful peacefully, although even peacefully, I actually think they will not be successful. I don't think the West is as dead as many people do, and I sometimes do, depending on how optimistic or pessimistic I am. I just don't see it. I don't see, we'll see. We will see. Then the next 10, 20 years are going to be a good indication. They have not taken, Pablo says they've already taken the US. They haven't, they have already taken the UK. They haven't taken the UK. I mean, the fact is that, if you go to London, you can see that it's not a Muslim state. It is not run by Sharia law. People are not terrified of walking in the streets. There's, in the center of London, you couldn't tell yeah, the Muslims are creating real problems in the rest of England and in the outskirts of London. And if they continue to do that, if they continue again their violent streak, they will be taken care of. This will not be allowed to continue, even in England. Even in England, the nationalist forces will be awoken one way or the other. Yeah, he says go to the right area and it looks like an Arab bazaar. That's right. And you go to the right area and it looks like Chinatown. You know, that's what immigration does. Places look like different places. That doesn't mean they've taken over the UK. I mean, this is the kind of hysteria and panic that makes absolutely no sense. If you go to the right areas of San Francisco, it looks like China, but you don't say the Chinese have taken over San Francisco. So, you know, you got to put everything in just in the right perspective. It's a real danger. It's a real threat. You saw what happened in Toronto today, but they're not. It's not like they're winning. It's not like they're taking over places. It's not like they're really politically or militarily taking Western European land. That's just not happening. All right. I mean, I'll be talking more about that. As I think I've said, I'm going to be giving a talk at Ocon this year on rational optimism. And I want to counter a lot of these arguments from hysteria, arguments from fear that I see all over the place. You know, there is, whether there is white genocide in South Africa or Muslims have taken over the UK or they've taken over Sweden. Muslims have taken over the world. Yes, Sweden is going through a significant rise in crime because of Islam, because they won't assimilate the Muslim immigrants into Sweden. They refuse to assimilate them. And they're seeing a significant rise in crime as a consequence of that. And instead of loading up on police and instead of identifying that is a problem, they are apologizing and they are being defeatist. And as a consequence, crime is only increasing. But that will stop. That will end. At some point, the Swedes, just like everybody else, will wake up to the risk. They'll hire additional police. They'll go into these neighborhoods and they'll clean them up. That will happen. Sooner would be better than later. But I talk to Swedes all the time. My guess is you guys don't. And even there, it's not like they are running around scared and petrified constantly. The crime rate in Sweden, even considering the increase in crime recently, is still per 100,000 lower than that of the United States. So even with the crime generated by Muslim gangs in Sweden, it's still lower than the crime rate in the U.S. And I don't see in the U.S. people scurrying and hiding because of the increases in crime, except for Donald Trump. So yeah, the more the more the Muslims are violent, the shorter their life is going to be. And little do they know what's coming and the devastation that is going to occur to them. So it's sad. So let me just say, very sad what happened in Toronto. As somebody wrote here, Toronto has always been highly multicultural and a very safe and clean city. And oh, that's interesting. So according to ABC is now reporting that the van driver was a 25-year-old named Alec Minasin. I can't quite tell. What if that could be. It could be from one of the Caucasus, an Islamic name from somewhere. Let me see if there's. Yeah, I don't see any more information about who the driver is, or what it was, or whether he was a Muslim or not. But that's not a Muslim name right off the bat. So who knows? It could turn out that the driver in Toronto was not even Muslim, and whatever. All right. They say they released a picture of him, and he does look Middle Eastern, but his name, Alec Minasin, doesn't. He's not Minassian. That doesn't Minassian. That's still not It's still not Middle Eastern. Again, it might be from the Caucasus, it might be Chechen or something like that. It's really, really, you know, Google says it's an Armenian surname, but again, that's the Caucasus. So Armenian would not be Muslim, but it could be from Chechnya or somewhere like that, which is somewhat related to Armenia, and could still be Muslim. So we'll have to wait and see. I still suspect it is. It's just a tactic of them on why would anybody else do it other than that. But again, hard to tell. Hard to tell. All right, let's see. North Korea. So a lot of people have declared that. Let me just take this question quickly. Do you agree? Although I did say you have to use the super chat. You guys, $5. You can ask me a question for $5. It's worth it. Do you agree with Dr. Peikoff that if America falls, the whole West will follow? I don't know anymore. I think he's still probably right, but I'm not convinced anymore. Now the West, what is the West? Is Asia, is parts of Asia, the West, any place in the world that adopts the idea of the efficacy of reason and the idea of individualism is, from my perspective, the West. And I'm not sure that if America falls, the rest of the world will follow. I used to think that. I used to agree with Leonard, but I'm just not sure anymore. I see the United States deteriorating faster than I think other countries are. So who knows? I really don't know what the future holds in terms of respect for individualism and respect for capitalism. It might be Brazil. It might be a young generation in Brazil that brings about a revolution there. It really is hard to know. I do think when the U.S. falls, it becomes harder because the U.S. has always been a model. The U.S. has always been the place everybody has looked up to as the standard bearer. But that could also change. I do not believe that the future is about Chinese domination. I don't believe that. I think the Chinese here are going to hit a brick wall. I think they're moving in the wrong direction. Economic growth has already slowed significantly in China, and I think they're going to struggle from here on because they're centralizing power in a way that always leads to destruction and to failure. So the fact that Xi is declaring himself, in a sense, dictator and a lifelong dictator suggests to me that China is going to start declining, not getting stronger. Now, the United States might decline faster than China. That is hard to tell. But I think the world now is bigger than the US, and I think the reason is the internet. I think the internet makes the world small. It makes the world flat. It makes borders less important and less significant, particularly for the transfer of ideology, particularly for sense of life, which I think can now arise in a variety of different places because it can be influenced by ideas that travel at the speed of light, through the internet. Alejandro, thank you for the super chat. I don't see a question, but thank you for the contribution to the Yaron Brook Show. So you're the ones whose answer I gave. So thank you for following up with a contribution. So it's going to be interesting, I think, to see the next 50 years are going to be interesting. I hope. One of the reasons I don't want to die, if I can be personal for a second, one of the reasons it's not that I fear death, that I despise the idea of dying, is because I'm really curious about what's going to happen in the world. The future, to me, is so interesting, and I'd like to be around to see how it unfolds. Now, that of course, that there's always the future, so I'd like to live forever to see the unfolding of history together forever. But I'd like to see what the next chapter is. I'd really like to see what happens with China. I'd really like to see what happens with the United States. There's a lot happening. There's a lot going on in the world. And I think I've said this on one of the shows, but one of the things I realized when I visited China for the first time is by being so US centric, by living here and thinking about the US and focusing in the US and obsessing about every election and obsessing about every little news item that comes out in the United States. To a large extent, most of us have missed what's really important in history. Because over the last 30 years, what's been important has not happened in the US. I think the only important thing to happen in the US over the last 30 years is Silicon Valley. I can't think of anything else. Not the, 9/11 maybe, but not the election of Bill Clinton or Bush or Obama or Trump is going to be of any lasting, dramatic, historical significance. But let me tell you, the death of Mao Zedong and the opening up of China and the economic growth that China has experienced and the rise from poverty of over 1 billion people, the creation of a new middle class in Asia, the changes that have happened in China and the changes that have happening in India are so revolutionary. They are of historical significance. They will be studied 100, 200, 500 years from now, when who exactly is the president and whether Hillary Clinton should go to jail or not will long be forgotten, when the particulars of any given American elections will long be forgotten. The change that has happened in Asia over the last 30, 35 years will be remembered. And I missed it. And I think most of us missed it because we are too America focused. We're too America centric. We don't think big. We don't think globally. And it's time. Today, the world is global. You know, the fall of the Berlin Wall is a massively significant historical event. And yet, I don't think objectivists, I don't think people in America really fully realized its significance and absorbed what it meant and so on. So I am vowing to be much more broader and look at the world in much more wider perspective, because I think the most interesting things in the world are probably not happening in the United States right now. And the more positive things in the world are probably not happening in the United States right now. All right. Let's see. What was the next topic I was going to go to was, all right, North Korea. Yes, North Korea. Talk about insignificant things. So the North Korea dictator has announced that he is going to stop investing in new technology when it comes to nuclear. They're not going to test anymore. They've already achieved what they want to achieve, and they don't need to work any further on it. And this all in anticipation of this historical moment in which the president of the United States, what do you call it? Demeans himself to such an extent that he goes and meets with the dictator of a 2-bit nothing banana republic called North Korea. But the president of the United States, the greatest country in human history, is going to belittle himself and belittle our country enough to go and meet with the president, with the dictator of North Korea. And in anticipation of that, the North Koreans have said, and we of course believe everything coming out of North Korea, they have promised to reduce the investment in nuclear technology and to stop the development of more nuclear programs. Let me see. I'm trying to remember, but I think North Koreans have said that like 20 times in the last 30 years. I think that's right. I think about 20 times in the last 30 years. Every time America compromises with them, anytime America is willing to appease them, anytime we're willing to have direct talks with them, they promise all kinds of things. Then we loosen up the trade embargo, and then they cheat, and then we go, oh my God, we're shocked. They cheated. How could that happen? Never happened before. And history repeats itself and repeats itself and repeats itself. And nobody ever learns. Here's the principle. There's a principle. In foreign policy, just like in morality, just like in life, there are principles. One does not negotiate with evil, period. You don't negotiate with North Korea. You don't. You either bomb them into oblivion, or you embargo them and you do a naval blockade and you stop them from exporting their nuclear technology, and you knock down every missile they put into the air, or whatever it is you do, you don't negotiate with them. Nothing good will come of that. Anyway, this will be considered a major Trump victory. It already has been, but it's absurd and ridiculous. Absurd and ridiculous. All right, North Korea. Nothing else to say until Trump meets with this North Korean clown. I mean, that's astounding. Think about all the names North Korea has called this guy, and yet they're going to meet and they're going to pretend that they're best friends. But Trump has said that he can be best friends with anybody, even people he has called horrible names. He can change his mind like that. Why? Because he has no principles. He has no ideas. All right, Paul says he can only contribute $1.99. I don't know. I don't know why that is, because Alejandro did $2 even, and other people's have done $5, $10, $50 even. So, you should try again. But I don't know if you have a question, Paul. I just see the contribution. You have to move the slider to the right. There we go. All right. So that is Toronto, North Korea. Google, just a quick word on Google. Google is just unbelievable amounts of money Google is making. I mean, it's just terrific to see. It's the business continues to advertising continues to jump, to increase. Google continues to invest huge amounts of money in capital investment, in growing its business, in making its business stronger and more successful. I love it when companies report record profits. I don't own any Google stock, just for full disclosure. I mean, I probably do in one of my index funds, but I don't own explicitly Alphabet, which is the owner of Google. But it is pretty amazing the amount of money these companies can make, and the success that they have, and the beauty of freedom, and the beauty of technology, and what they can achieve. So I am today celebrating Google's profitability. And I know some of you out there, many of you out there, maybe hate technology companies and want them regulated. Not me. I love these technology companies. I might not agree politically with their leaders, but these are amazing companies doing amazing things, making my life and your life much, much, much better. And of course, Google is investing in all kinds of products that are making your life better. If you're using an Android phone, that's Google technology. And hopefully we'll see other revolutionary products coming from Google in the years to come. They're certainly investing a lot of money in that. All right, Pompeo has, looks like, will win confirmation in the Senate. Was touch and go there. Some Democrats have promised to vote for him. I don't know what kind of deals Trump cut with them in order to get their votes. And Rand Paul is going to vote for Pompeo. Now, that is bizarre. That is really, really strange, and suggests to me that Rand Paul is not as principled as I thought he was. Now, Pompeo, according to Rand Paul, is a warmongering, bad guy, right? And here we go. Rand Paul is voting for Pompeo as Secretary of State, in spite of Pompeo being a hawk when it comes to foreign policy and defense issues. So I don't know. We got some Democrats are voting for him. I'm not surprised about that. But the more conservative foreign policy Democrats are going for him. But I was pretty surprised by Rand. I thought Rand would stick to his guns on this. Again, I think that it's Trump using his charm on these people. All right, Paul can only do $1.99, but you could do, if you do $1.99 enough times, then we could really get to some good amounts here. Right. Interesting. All right, now Mark Pompeo, probably not a bad choice. A little bit too interventionist in some areas for my liking, but not a bad choice as Secretary of State. The one area which I think he's terrible, and this is, again, an area that you would have expected Rand Paul to stand up against him, and that is the area of domestic surveillance. Pompeo is a huge fan and supporter of the NSA, a huge fan of support of giving them full ability to listen in on us. He's also one of the guys, I think he said we should hang Snowden. So really bad, really bad on issues of privacy and issues of surveillance. And Rand Paul has always been good on those issues. So I'm surprised about this. Okay, all right. Unshelled Coast is asking a question, and he's put his money where his mouth is. So I will take the question. What about at least prolonging the process of an evil country getting a nuclear bomb, like the Iran deal, for example? I don't know much about the deal. All right, so I'll do more about the deal. If I do a show tomorrow, I'll do that. I don't want to take up too much time here, but no, I think the deal is a bad deal. I think the way to prolong a evil country from getting a nuclear bomb is to bomb its nuclear facilities into oblivion, which is what we should have done and what we still can do and what we should do. Iran was also about to capitulate, I think, because of the sanctions. The people were starving. The economy was really weak. In 2009, I think it was, there were real demonstrations in the street against the regime. And the Obama administration had an opportunity to support the demonstrators and actually help overthrow the regime. That have done more to get rid of Iran's nuclear program than anything else America could do. So I would love to support so embargo them significantly, and then if that doesn't work, if they're still developing nuclear weapons, then bomb their facilities into oblivion. Yes, that is what I would do. And that's what should have been done. And that's what Trump should do. We'll see. I think next week he's deciding, or later this week, he's deciding what to do about the Iran deal. But the Iran deal in and of itself is a bad one. Now, what's his name? Oliver did a show, like a comedy skit on the Iran deal. I might do one of those where I take that apart and criticize it. So we'll see. Of course, it's humor, so it's hard to do, but I'll see. Yes, Unshelled Coach, you should be very proud of your first super chat. Thank you for doing it, and great. Oh wait, last topic I want to talk about, and then we'll call it a night, and that is Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is going to announce a plan that will guarantee every American a job. How is he going to do that? Well, basically, the government will guarantee that they will employ anybody who wants a job at $15 an hour. So instead of raising the minimum wage, which is a horrible idea anyway, they are just going to create competition to private enterprise and thus drive wages up to $15. So the government will pay anybody who wants to work $15 an hour. Now, what will those people do? Well, probably dig ditches and fill them up again, but they'll be working and they'll get money and they'll be able to buy stuff with it. And since we know that the economy is driven by consumption, and we know that the value of work is the money you get for it, not the actual work that you do, this is a great plan. Now, not only is this Bernie's plan, but we now have a number of Democrats who are going to run for president in 2 years supporting this. I think Kirsten Gillibrand from New York has expressed their support, and Senator Cory Booker, two senators who are probably going to run for president in a Democratic ticket. You can't tell the difference anymore between Republicans and Democrats, but on the Democratic ticket in 2020, are supporting a plan like this. The idea is that this will basically be infrastructure spending, but infinite. We will spend as much as we need to guarantee that every American who wants a job gets a job at $15 an hour, whether they can do $15 an hour worth of work or not. They will take proposals from cities and towns and counties and states for infrastructure work. The government will then allocate money to that, as long as those states or cities or whatever hire people at $15 an hour, and they will approve as many projects as needed to get the unemployment rate in the United States down to 0. And the labor participation rate, the number of people actually participating in the labor force, back up to, I don't know, 70, 80, 90, maybe get everybody to work. Maybe we can have babies work as well. Old people could work. $15 an hour, I'll send my kids out to work. It's not a bad deal. Where's the money going to come from? They haven't told us yet, but they can borrow. I mean, we can borrow, right? We'll just borrow the money. Why is that a problem? I don't see why that's a problem. And why only $15 an hour? Well, $15 an hour is a good start, right? And then it'll be 30, and then one day it'll be $500 an hour. Inflation, we'll have to print money. That's okay. We'll just raise wages as inflation goes up. And how do you pay back the debt? Well, nobody pays back the debt. Nobody needs to pay back a debt. That's just ridiculous. That's just that conservative economics that nobody actually pays attention to. Look, Japan's not paying back the debt. They have 250% of GDP debt, and we're only at 100. We've got plenty of room to grow. Plus, and this is the key, right? These people will start making money, so they will start paying taxes, and they will consume more. I hope I don't have to explain why all this is nonsense, right? They will consume more, and therefore businesses will make more money, and they'll pay more taxes, and we can always raise taxes on the rich. So I don't see a problem. I think this whole revenue problem is exaggerated. It's those loony free market economists who are crazy, who think you have to, the government actually has to pay back the debt, and government actually has to have resources, have some money, before it spends it. Yeah, we're gonna do a massive infrastructure plan, bigger than even Trump wants. Trump might support this. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how Trump responds to something like this. It'll be interesting, because my guess is he'll steal it from Bernie and run with it in 2020. But yeah, this is how we're going to get all Americans back to work. We shouldn't deregulate. We don't want to cut taxes. We don't want to create economic activity where private enterprise hires them. And some people have expressed some concerns. It's kind of funny expressing some concerns. I mean, this is an absolute unmitigated disaster. This would be the end of the US economy. This would make us worse than Europe. Europe doesn't have this, right? But some economists are worried because they fear that people leave their private jobs and go and work for the government. They also fear that as wages go up to 15%, that this will accelerate the use of robots, and that there will be fewer jobs, because it won't be easier. It won't become easier to start a business. It won't be easier to start a business in the private sector. So we will become more and more dependent on the government sector. So what will happen is that robots will replace people, but the private sector will not be able to adjust, will not be able to create the jobs to replace the jobs lost to the robots, so that everybody will be working for the government, and the robots will actually be doing all the productive work. Now, this will result in ultimately in a universal basic income. So I don't know why Bernie doesn't just propose a universal basic income. It's much simpler, because it'll get there much faster, much easier. But that's basically what he's proposing. Just instead of digging holes and filling them in, we won't waste the human labor. We'll just write them a check and give it to them. That, to me, is a much more rational solution. Universal basic income beats, in my view, this stupid $15 an hour guarantee wages. Because at least with universal basic income, you can actually have a market elsewhere, right? Outside of, you're basically paying people a particular wage, but anything above that, they can work, they can make, they can produce, and the jobs all in the private sector. Indeed, a properly constructed universal basic income would actually result in firing hundreds of thousands of government employees, maybe millions of government employees, and in that sense would be better. So while I'm against the universal basic income, it is by far the best mechanism by which to provide welfare, if it replaces every other mechanism that exists. So if you can fire all the bureaucrats and fire all the teachers and fire everybody who works for the government and replace it with a voucher system, basically, then it's an improvement over the system we have today. It's still not right. It's still not moral. It's still not where we should be, but it is an improvement. All right. So, I mean, maybe we'll take an opportunity once the complete plan is out. We'll take a few minutes to dissect it and rip it to shreds. But that just gives you a flavor of the left is going wacky left. By the way, I don't think this is electable. I don't think a plan like this. I think they're misreading the American public. I think Americans are moving to the left, but they're not moving to this left. I really think this is more of the left's impotency, which will strengthen elements on the right. I just don't see Americans voting for a plan to dig ditches at $15 an hour. But we will see. We will see. All right, guys. As I said, I'm back home, and that means there'll be more shows. There might be a show tomorrow. There might be one on Thursday. On Saturday, there'll definitely be, unless Amy's unavailable or you're on an Amy show. And on Sunday, I hope to resurrect my my show interviewing objectivist intellectuals. So thank you all, and have a great rest of your evening, and hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to share it. Don't forget, particularly for those of you who did not use the Super Chat, to go to Patreon and become a supporter of the show. You can also do so on PayPal, paypal.me/Yaron Brook Show. And finally, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. We just crossed 9,000, I think 9,100, and we are driving towards 10,000. And of course, from there to 100,000 in 2 years, we need to be at 100,000. So, help get my subscribers up by sharing the show and by encouraging your friends to subscribe themselves. Talk to you soon. Bye, everybody.